A new piece in the Daily Poster this week takes a deep dive into a left-bashing Sunday New York Times op-ed originally titled "A Way Forward for Biden and the Dems in 2022 and 2024." According to David Sirota, the op-ed, quote, offers a rare glimpse of how corporate media imperceptibly puts its thumb on the scale for a particular ideology that is decidedly neither centrist nor objective.
The piece was co-authored by Mark Penn, a pollster and a private equity mogul with ties to the dark money group No Labels, and former New York City lawmaker Andrew Stein, the guy who literally ran Democrats for Trump. Penn and Stein argue that if Democrats want to reverse course and rescue themselves from electoral bloodbath in 22 and 24, they should, quote, listen to centrists and push back on the left. They write in part, this would mean meeting the voters head on with stronger borders, a slower transition from fossil fuels, a focus on bread and butter economic issues such as the price of gas and groceries, fixes to the supply chain fiasco that is impacting the cost of goods, and the pursuit of more moderate social spending bill. Here to expand is editor-at-large at Jacobin, former senior advisor to the Bernie Sanders campaign, and founder of the Daily Poster, David Sirota. David, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And David, what I thought was fascinating is that flowing out of your new podcast that we talked about last week, The Meltdown, you had also submitted a piece to the New York Times, kind of making the counter-argument. And so the Times had was presented with this choice about what vision, they wanted to present to the Democrats as their preferred way forward. So tell us why you think they went the way they did.
Well, look, let's put it in context. I mean, the New York Times published a House editorial making the case that Democrats need to essentially abandon the left. They had their podcast, The Daily, having on a Congresswoman, Abby Spanberger, who was saying the Democrats essentially need to abandon and betray the left, and that Joe Biden shouldn't try to be FDR. And then they published this op-ed from Mark Penn and Andrew Stein. And let's be clear, without acknowledging or disclosing to readers Penn's corporate ties, his ties to a dark money group trying to kill the reconciliation bill, and both of those authors' ties to Donald Trump. So readers were left in the dark. And I think what it shows is that the largest newspaper, the newspaper that sets the tone for what is considered legitimate and not legitimate, is often putting its thumb on the scale to try to not be objective, to try to bake in a particular set of political prescriptions, a set of political ideologies. Look, our op-ed that we submitted, and it's fine that the New York Times didn't take our op-ed, I'm not taking it personally, but our op-ed made the exact opposite point, which is that history teaches us that when the Democrats betray their agenda before a midterm election, they tend to get shellacked in those elections. That's literally what happened in 2009 and 2010, as our series Meltdown argued, and our series Meltdown showed. And that is not really very much part of the conversation, the political conversation right now. And that's not by accident. That's the point. It's not by accident that history has been memory holed, because there are corporate Democrats who want a different narrative out there.
It seems interesting that it's almost like they're gaslighting or brainwashing in a way, because Ryan has done a lot of reporting on this actually about Virginia voters and why they ended up going the way they did. And none of them really said, it was because of infrastructure or, I mean, they were citing more culture issues or schools, children, right? It wasn't, and I think people get confused when it comes to what is the left agenda, right? And so the New York Times is pointing at an economic left agenda and saying that's to blame. But a lot of people, there's a difference between the culture left and the economic left. And they're conflating the two and saying it's all, it's the left. And there's got to be that separation there. And so what they're doing is they're taking, right, and they're taking really people who were clearly upset more about a cultural left, and then saying, well, see, they don't want all of these policies, these economic left policies, and they're almost trying to brainwash the readers into believing like that's what it is. It's, well, we don't like these leftist agendas.
It's such a good point. And what I would also add to it is that when the Democrats do not have a strong economic message, they allow for elections to be more based on a culture war debate. And I think that is the part of the discussion, the political discussion, that's been missing. That if you are promising voters a set of economic policies to specifically help them right now, materially help them right now, and then you betray those promises. You don't deliver a $15 minimum wage. You don't deliver paid family leave. You spend months making headlines about how you're not going to expand Medicare. You're not going to honor your promises to bring down drug prices. Then what you've said is, we're not really having an economic policy debate. Let's have elections be about culture war politics. And that's when the Republicans tend to succeed. So the point here is that one side, you're right, the Mark Penns of the world, not surprisingly from the corporate world, is essentially trying to conflate the left with everything to say that the Democrats should simply move to the right on everything. And there's the counter argument, which is rooted in history, which says if the Democrats really want to compete here, they have to deliver real material gains to millions of voters right now.
Well, and I think, even I have to concede, I think all of these proposals, often the proposals you're describing that you're advocating for, I realize they're popular. It's when you roll them all together, so they're popular with Americans, but then Americans don't like, in the abstract, the idea of, big government centrally controlling the economy and spending lots of money and spending well beyond our means. But the individual things are all popular, so I think it's a bit of a packaging issue for the left. You don't want to identify these. You shouldn't want to identify these things as socialism, because socialism people don't like, but they do like taking care of people and taking care of families and making accommodations for children and protecting workers and that sort of thing.
And this is the way that the whole problem goes back to the filibuster, by the way. That I've been asked this question a bunch. Why are the Democrats packaging so much together in one giant bill, one giant bite at the apple? Well, it's because they refuse to reform the filibuster. So the reconciliation process only really gives them one shot to pass landmark spending legislation. So they have to pile everything into the reconciliation bill because that's the only 51 vote vehicle to get something passed. So if you don't solve the filibuster, you certainly create a political problem for yourself where you can't do a series of bills which are taking smaller bites at the apple, smaller, more popular bites at the apple.
David Sirota, the new podcast is called The Meltdown. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks to all of you.
And we will have more Rising right after this.